There is something it is like to see red, something it is like to feel pain, something it is like to hear music and have it move you. This seems obvious, but explaining why there is something it is like, why physical processes in a brain give rise to inner experience at all, turns out to be one of the deepest unsolved problems in all of philosophy. David Chalmers called it the hard problem of consciousness. Chalmers drew a crucial distinction. The so-called easy problems of consciousness are questions like, how does the brain integrate information? How do we focus attention? How do we distinguish sleep from wakefulness? How do we report our mental states? These are called easy not because they're simple. They're enormously complex, but because they're the kind of problems science knows how to approach. You study the mechanisms, you trace the functions. But there's something left over. Even if we solved every easy problem completely, even if we mapped every neural circuit and explained every behavior, we still wouldn't have answered why any of it feels like anything. That's the hard problem. Philosophers use the word qualia, the raw, felt qualities of experience, the redness of red, the sharpness of pain, the particular taste of coffee. Here's what makes qualia philosophically strange. You can describe the wavelength of red light. You can map which neurons fire when you see it. You can explain how the visual system processes chromatic information. But none of that description captures what it's like to actually see red. The experience itself seems to be something over and above the physical description. This gap between the objective, physical account and the subjective, felt quality, is what the hard problem is about. Philosopher Frank Jackson proposed one of philosophy's most famous thought experiments. Mary is a brilliant scientist who has lived her entire life in a black and white room. She has learned every physical fact about color vision, the wavelengths, the neural mechanisms, everything. Then one day, Mary leaves the room and sees red for the first time. Does she learn something new? Jackson argued, yes. She learns what it's like to see red. And if she learned something new, then that knowledge wasn't contained in the physical facts, which suggests that conscious experience, qualia, is something beyond the physical. This is the knowledge argument against physicalism. Chalmers introduced another thought experiment. The philosophical zombie, AP zombie, as philosophers call it, is a being physically identical to you. Same neurons, same behavior, same brain states, but with no inner experience whatsoever. The lights are on, but nobody's home. Chalmers argues that such a being is conceivable. And if it's conceivable, it might be metaphysically possible. And if it's possible that consciousness is absent from something physically identical to us, then consciousness can't just be a matter of physical organization. The zombie argument doesn't prove consciousness is non-physical, but it shows the connection between brain and experience isn't logically necessary. It's a further fact that needs explaining. Physicalists push back hard. Some argue Mary doesn't learn a new fact. She just gains a new way of knowing an old fact. The knowledge about red was always there. She now has direct access to it. Others argue the zombie thought experiment is incoherent. If something is truly physically identical to us, it would have to be conscious. Because consciousness is what certain physical processes do. Daniel Dennett takes the most radical view. Qualia as we conceive of them don't exist. We are systematically mistaken about our own inner experience. What feels like an irreducible felt quality is just the brain representing its own states. The intuition pump, Dennett says, is leaking. One surprising response to the hard problem has gained serious philosophical traction. Panpsychism. The idea, maybe consciousness, or something proto-conscious, is a fundamental feature of reality, not generated by physical processes, but present at the base level. Philip Goff and others argue this isn't the mystical claim it sounds like. If matter at every level has some minimal experiential character, then complex consciousness in brains could arise from the combination of simpler experiential properties. This dissolves the hard problem by making experience basic, not something to be explained in terms of non-experiential matter, but something that was always there. Neuroscientist Giulio Tononi proposed integrated information theory. His core idea. Consciousness is integrated information. Specifically, it is identical with a system's phi. Its measure of how much information the system generates over and above its parts. IIT makes a striking prediction. Any system with high phi is conscious. To some degree, certain simple circuits might be minimally conscious. Certain grid-like structures might be unconscious even if they're complex. Critics point out that IIT implies some very counterintuitive things, and that it's nearly impossible to calculate phi for real neural systems. But it represents the most developed attempt to give consciousness a precise, measurable definition. The hard problem isn't just academic. It touches questions we urgently need to answer. When do fetuses become conscious? When does an animal suffer in a morally significant way? Could an AI system be conscious? If so, which ones? And what would we owe them? These questions can't be answered by behavioral tests alone, because the hard problem tells us behavior and consciousness can come apart. A system could behave as if it's conscious without having inner experience. Or it could have experience we can't detect. The stakes are real. Our answers about consciousness shape how we treat patients in vegetative states, how we treat animals, and what moral weight we give to artificial minds. More than 30 years after Chalmers named it, the hard problem remains unsolved. We've mapped the brain. We've built systems that talk about their inner states. We've proposed theories from panpsychism to illusionism. But we still can't explain, in terms everyone agrees on, why there is something it is like to be you. Maybe the solution requires a conceptual revolution we haven't had yet. Maybe it requires giving up assumptions about the nature of mind, or matter, or both. Or maybe consciousness is exactly what it seems. The one thing in the universe that can't be fully explained from outside. Because any real explanation has to be felt from within. Part 3 of the Big Questions.